Okay, let's record. Hello, everyone. This is going to be a video that's going to be part of a short little series about Arduino and kind of that portion of the programming digital media class. The way I'm going to set this up is I'm going to be recording several videos. So today I'm hoping to get the one that you're watching right this second and the one on analog Arduino done. I'm going to be doing them kind of in separate portions. So I'll talk about the code part in one video, and then uh, the circuit building part in a separate video, and then through the magic of video editing, just stick them together into one longer thing. So you'll have, some separate ones and then longer ones all in the playlist together to check out. So with that being said, let's just kind of hop right into it. Uh, so before we do anything, this will be the code-based video. So if you don't have the code editor downloaded, you're going to want that. You can get that from the main Arduino site, arduino.cc, and under software, you can find the Arduino IDE right here. And you can download it for your appropriate device. There's other versions as well, so you can explore it if you want. You can get a beta version of um, the version 2.0. It's fine. It works okay, but the version 1.8.19 is a little more stable than the others. So um, basically, just find this one. This gets updated periodically as well. I don't think this one has been updated uh, as recently. So again, stick with the version 1.8 point whatever to start with. But if you want to explore some of these other ones, you can. There's various older versions and other formats and whatnot. But go ahead and download and get that installed. If for whatever reason you can't get this installed, there is a browser based web editor right here, and you can go into that. You have to make an account and log in. Mine was still logged in from before, um, but you can do all the things in the downloaded app in the web browser. But when we get to the final section of this video will have three, or this series will have three big sections. There's going to be reasons why this can become a bit of a pain to work with. So I recommend working with the downloaded app. So once you've done that, we can get it open. I don't have it on the bottom here. Arduino. Arduino. And it will open up. It's a pretty small, simple software. I forgot I made my font bigger for the purpose of a video. So let's just to it. I'm going to open up the programming digital media page. Oop, that's P5. I wanted that one. There we go. And I'm going to head into Arduino while the software is getting up and going. So just a few quick things. There are some general differences between working in P5 and with Arduino. The most common ones are that all of your lines have to end with the semicolons. Again, anytime you give the computer a command, it needs to end with this semicolon. Otherwise, the code will not work. And there's no way around that. You just have to do it or it will not work. So stress that to your students. They will get error messages and the code will not run. Um, Generally speaking, you're going to type void instead of function. There are points where, uh, you know, that won't be the case, but those are a lot less common if you just kind of stick to the main portion of what we do here. We call it loop instead of draw. It's pretty, they do the same thing, basically. Um, and then variable types is the other kind of big one. So in P5 and JavaScript, what we do is just say let, and that makes the variable, and we can make it any type of variable we want. In Arduino, that's not the case. We have to specify what kind of variable we're going to work with. So int is for integer numbers, floats are for floating points, so they have decimal points after them. Constants are read only, so you can make a constant and it doesn't change while the code runs. Uh, char is characters, what it's short for is for strings. There's also bool for booleans, stuff like that. So again, you have to specify what kind of variable you want to work with. Let's see. Other than here, these are the main functions we're going to be using as part of the base Arduino stuff. So whenever we use a digital pin, we have to specify that it's an input or an output. We can write and read digital data, and we can also write and read analog data. Again, that's kind of the basicness of it. So real quick, I'm going to pull up the Arduino code editor here. I have some stuff to update. So if that message pops up, you can click on it, and it'll show you stuff to update. So I've got a handful here. So you can just click update all of these. You don't necessarily have to. It depends on what you have installed. I have a fair bit of these libraries installed, so I'm almost always getting some kind of something needs to be updated message. But anyway, here is the web editor. Basically, by default, it'll name it sketch underscore whatever the date is, and then a letter. And then if you've made a bunch of sketches in within 24 hours, that letter just works its way through the alphabet. So whenever you make something, in order to send it to your board, you have to save it, and there's certain ways it has to save in a folder and all that. But we start off just with the basic setup and loop, just like P5. This is the default starting code. So basically, we're going to work with something really simple here. And we're just going to make some digital outputs just to begin with. Something nice and easy. We're just going to say const int. So we're saying that it's an integer variable, but it's also a constant. We're giving it two names here, like I mentioned. So this will not change while the code runs. And we'll say LED pin equals 13. All right, so basically in our circuit that you'll see in just a second, we're going to connect this to pin 13. It's pretty simple. That's going to be a digital pin, so we have to go into our setup function here and say pin mode. And we have to, we'll say LED pin, and that will be an output right there. So again, for every digital pin that we have to use, and on the Arduino Uno, they should be labeled digital pins, but I'm gonna skip past the setup. I'm gonna hop right into the digital stuff. So this is a page here that talks about the digital pins and things like that, and we're actually going to be building this example through the code, so I won't look at it here. But that's not what I wanted. I wanted setup. Yeah, parts of the Arduino. So your Arduino, assuming you're using an Arduino Uno, which is the most common one to use here, there's a bunch of stuff on the board. This is an Arduino unit. It's not made by the company, but it's all right here. There's a bunch of different stuff, and I've kind of labeled the most important things for you to have. So there's an LED, that's built into the Arduino here. There's also a power indicator, a kind of restart button. So if you press this, the Arduino just stops and restarts and runs the code that you've sent to it. You can connect it to the USB, and that's how we get the data sent to it normally, as well as power supply. But you can also connect it through this barrel pin connector here to like a battery or something if you want. We have analog pins, digital pins, and then the power, specifically the section on power distribution. So those are all kind of the big main things. So any of these digital pins, they can either send electricity in or they can receive it or send it out. That's the main idea here. Digital, the short version of it is it's two states. It's digital two states. It's either on or off, in or out. That's it. There's no other options. It's either 100% or nothing. It's on or off. I can't. I'm basically just kind of repeating myself at that point, but that's how these pins up here function. There'll be another video later on. I think I said earlier there's 3 sections to this. I misspoke. There's gonna be 4. Um, but with these little squiggly lines here are indicating something that'll come up in video 3, and then we'll talk about the last video a bit later. But that's all there. The analog pins down here are only input pins. They cannot output stuff. So again, we're going to be focusing on these digital pins, and they can either send or receive. So we have to say pin mode and tell it that we're going to either output or input electricity. And we'll work with the input a little bit later. So I've got that there. Inside of the loop, we're just going to say digital write, which means we're going to send and you're going to output a digital signal through a pin. And we just have to say what pin we want. So the LED pin, we're going to say, we're going to write that to high. There we go. And then I'm just going to have it wait a little bit. A delay pauses the loop. And let's just say, I'll keep it the same as the other example at 1,000 milliseconds. So that's going to pause the loop by 1 second. I'm then going to copy and paste everything, and we're going to write the value low to the LED pin. So what we'll see when we send this to the board is it's going to turn on the LED. And we're going to do that. I didn't explain, but basically we're going to turn on and off, and on and off. And that will happen forever. So what you're going to want to do is plug in your Arduino Uno to the computer. We're going to send or flash this code to the Arduino. In order to do that, once you've connected it, you're going to want to go to Tools, and you're going to want to make sure that your correct board is selected. So you can go and find it here. Usually it'll be Uno, but here's the other Arduino boards. And if you have things that aren't Arduino, you can still use them here. I've got a whole bunch installed as part of a library for some other stuff that I do with non-Arduino based boards, but they use the same manager here. But then under port, once you've connected it, you should see a port, and it'll be labeled here with, it'll say Arduino Uno. As I'm recording just the code video, I don't have that right this second plugged in, but in just a moment we will. But anyways, you'll see that there. If you're on a Mac and not a Windows device, it won't say COM6. It'll say it has some big long name, but it'll still say in like parentheses afterwards Arduino Uno, and that's the one you want to select. We're gonna get an error if I try to upload mine because I don't actually have it connected. Basically, it just will say it can't find the board it's looking for on the port you specified. So again, you want to make sure it's looking for the correct board on the correct port, and you'll see that kind of at the bottom of the screen. Let me just hide my face. There we go. So you'll see at the bottom right of the screen where my face was, just above my system clock, it'll say it's looking for an Arduino Uno board on port COM6. So if there's not an Arduino Uno board plugged into COM port 6, then you just won't see the Arduino. You're going to get an error. So make sure that all matches up. And then we have a few options up here. So there's the verify, which just does, hey, does this work? And you have to save it first if you haven't. So I'm just going to save it at the default bit. It's going to compile the sketch. And if there are no errors, which there shouldn't be on this one, it gives you some information about it. Basically just tells you how much it does and how much, memory you have left on the Arduino board. There's not a lot of memory. 32 kilobytes. Yeah, 32K. So that's not a ton of others. So just be aware of that. You can't have these massive codes. But anyways, once you've done that, you hit upload, and it will verify it, and it will send it to the board. And so through the magic of video editing, I'm gonna say transition stuff here, and you'll see it on the screen. Uh, so if you're watching just this one, obviously we won't see it, but I'll be editing these videos together into um, a more cohesive bit. But what we should have seen, again, we will be coming back from that now, is that the built-in LED is blinking on and off. And then we will have also built in a circuit that has another LED working with that. So hopefully that was nice and straightforward. What I want to do next is now add in a digital input. So the digital input, as we'll see, are any digital signal that is being received by the Arduino. So it is sending that data, or that electricity in, and the Arduino is responding to, is there electricity, yes or no, on a certain pin. So to do that, I think a button or a switch is pretty straightforward. So let's work with a button first. So const int button pin is going to equal, and I'm just going to arbitrarily pick 7 this time. For right now, it doesn't necessarily matter, but later on it will matter what pins we are picking. Because pins 0 and 1 are used for sending and receiving data as well, you can run into issues putting things on digital pins 0 and 1, so I recommend avoiding it if possible. Okay. Next, I'm going to hop over to here. So I've made the button pin, and we'll say pin mode. And we'll say that the button pin is going to be an input in all caps. So you have that right there. And so we can just write around this. And basically, we're just going to say that if the button pin is written, then we will write the code. So I'm going to get rid of that delay, and we actually need to say int button state equals 0. So basically, we're going to monitor the button state, and I'll keep it consistent and make it button state. And I'm just giving it a default value of it's off. There's no electricity. So what we can do here is in the loop, we can just say button state gets assigned digital read. And specifically, we're going to read from the button pin. So every time the loop loops, we're going to store inside of the button state variable whatever the state of the pin is. So from the button pin, which in our case is pin number 7, we can swap, again, we can swap around what these pins are just by changing the variable value. But basically, we're going to read that value and, say there's either yes or no electricity, and it's going to get stored in that variable. So what we can do is then say if, and we'll add that, add it in here. So we'll say if something is true, we will write that LED pin to high. Else, we will do something else, and that else will be writing it to low. So that should all be there. So what that if will be is if the button state equals true, then we will write that to high, else we will write it to low. So in Arduino, I find that generally it works best with the 2 equal signs. I tend to use 3 in P5. There are reasons where you may or may not want, where you would need the 3 versus the 2. It's basically, it's either if it's equal to or if it's strictly equal to is the difference. And basically that just gets into more things like data types and stuff like that. But basically the short version is I find Arduino works best with 2 equal signs here in the conditional statement. Sometimes you may want 3. It's a more on a case-by-case basis, but for what we're doing and what the students do, 2 tends to work best in the conditional statements. So what we'll just say is we're going to, every time the loop runs, we're going to look at the pin and see what it is, and then if there is electricity flowing through the circuit, we will turn on that LED. Otherwise, we're just going to keep it off. So we're going to send that to the board. It's going to do all of its thing. I'm not going to do it because I don't have one plugged in while I record this. But if we verify the code, we got no issues. Again, if there's problems, this will all turn orange and it'll tell you there's problems. But that'll send there. So I'm going to transition again to the video of me working on the desk with all the stuff, but you'll see that again we'll wire up a button, and as we press the button, everything will work properly. So that's going to be the end of this video. Again, I'm working with all of the code, and now I'll be recording the circuit stuff, but I'll put this up just so you have a just code focused video. And then I'll also put up just the circuit based ones as well, and then I'll combine them into one larger form video. I recommend checking out these sections here of the Arduino. I have one that's again a bit more about some of the basic concepts of electricity, but then working with the digital inputs and outputs. So it's again this page here. Again, here's that blink example that comes from the Arduino. I kind of break that down. And then we kind of go through working with the LEDs and how that works and how we're building those circuits. Again, we tend to focus on LEDs in order to get this done because it's a very clear example of, hey, something has happened, something is responding. We can see very clearly that the circuit has gone through and has begun to work. So again, check that out. There's some examples, some circuits you can build. Just, very simple. Does it work? Does it blink? Things like that. And then talk about the circuit diagrams as well. But then what we just talked about, adding the buttons and switches to that system, that's kind of a bit what I talk about, but in a little more detail here. So definitely check that out, and I go in and I actually go step by step. This is the circuit I build in the video. So again, this is kind of some step by step process, and apparently that's dead, or just didn't load this time. But talks about switches as well, and there's some video examples and some code examples if you would rather see a switch instead of an LED or a button, I should say. And that's it. There's the code stuff I just talked about. And basically, again, yeah, if there's all that, I say hi here instead of true, that works. So I could go in and say if it's hi. Either one should work for this, but basically it's just if it's something, we're gonna write it to high. Otherwise, it'll be low. And you can see this kind of code here. As well, and some step-by-step bits with pictures to follow. And that should be all of the steps. Here's a diagram version of what we just did, and some possible applications and things like that. What I've got to wrap it out here is, again, some other digital sensors. So some sensors are digital versus analog. So you may or may not want to focus on those, but buttons and switches, I think, are the most straightforward things that students will be, familiar with and find a good use for. So I recommend sticking to buttons and switches. And this all leads into being able to control stuff with multiple buttons and switches. You're basically having different LEDs that you can trigger at the same time with that, and I give them some starting code. And I think that's just about it. So I'm going to wrap this one up, and I will see you all hopefully very shortly talking about analog code and analog circuits. So that's going to be it for me, and I will see you all the next time that I see you. Bye.